ero ragazzino, tantissimi anni fa, feci un viaggio in Spagna, c'era ancora Franco, l'epoca di Franco, con papà e mamma, avrò avuto 8-9 anni, e ci eravamo fermati los Países Vascos, eravamo a... dove era?
A San Sebastián, forse?
San Sebastián, sì, eravamo a San Sebastián, abbiamo pernottato una notte e mattino la mamma aveva ordinato la colazione in camera e quando è venuta la cameriera le ha detto che voleva ancora del burro. Che non... La cameriera l'ha guardata molto sorpresa perché la manteca e il burro sono due cose diverse abbastanza.
Sì, 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 un po' diverso queste due parole, sì.
Bene, allora adesso bando alle chiacchiere e cerco di far partire la presentazione perché mi sembra che ci siano tutti. Vi avviso, oggi devo fare la lectio brevis, come si dice in latino, perché purtroppo ho un impegno per cui alle 5:30 massimo devo smettere. Faremo un'ora e mezza invece che... insomma, recuperiamo poi. Allora, adesso cerco di far partire il... no, ecco, chiudi. Devo far partire la presentazione e poi ci siamo. Dunque, oggi, today we will talk a lot about Spain. Spain played a crucial role in Middle Ages for the advancement of culture in general and science and mathematics in particular. Okay, so let me go to the yes, here it is. Just a moment. Okay, now I do the following. I have to share the screen, but to share the screen I have to return to this. Okay, condividi schermata. Oh, so do you see a castle now? That is my desktop.
Sì,
Yes.
sì, sì.
Okay. Okay. Then I can go to the presentation and sequenza diapositive. Now we go to where I want to be. So here if you have traveled through Spain, you told me from where which city you are, but I forgot. From which city in Spain are you, Andres?
I'm from Zaragoza.
Ah, Zaragoza.
Sì.
Zaragoza. We will talk about Zaragoza today.
Okay.
And I presume that you probably have been in Toledo, I suppose, or not?
Yes, yes, yes. I've been in Toledo.
You have been in Toledo. So you will recognize now, let me know, where is it? Here. Okay. You will recognize in this picture one of the main entrances to the old city of Toledo.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
So it is important for us now to plunge a little bit into the history of medieval Spain in order to understand why Toledo happened at a certain point to become so important for culture as a whole and for particularly mathematics, physics, and astronomy. So, as Andres, you certainly know, and probably less deeply also the other student know, that there was the Arabic conquest of the Iberic Peninsula in 700. We already mentioned that. And as I stressed in previous lectures, this conquest was absolutely fast. In less than a couple of years, the Arabians came to rule all over 90% of the Iberic Peninsula. The only Christian independent region remained in the northwest portion. Leon and northern Castilla were the only places where the Arabs did not penetrate, probably because the mountain regions was not sufficiently attractive, and they had found much more interest in the rest of the territory. And then we have this epic history that lasts about 700s, that in Spanish is called Reconquista. But of course, this is an afterthought, because every civilization tends to rethink about its own history and shape it according to the result. There is no real obvious idea that in the 8th century there was a plan of Reconquista in these Christian little kingdoms that had remained in northern Spain. They tried simply to survive. And what was a question that I many times thought about is what was the extension to which there was Arabization of the population in Spain. It seems from many historical evidences that it was quite large. Population started to speak Arabic even if they were Christians, because that was the dominant language. So the Arabization of Spain was very deep. And of course, we have traces of that in the many words in Spanish language that come from some Arabic root. And I have not to explain that to Andres, I suppose. Alcalde is not certainly a Latin name. It means the mayor. Just to make one, Alcazar is the castle, if I'm not mistaken, and that is also an Arabic word, and so on. And this is mostly evident. I always wondered why, but I think there is an obvious reason in the names for vegetables and fruits. This is where there is the largest discrepancy between Italian and other Latin languages and Spanish. And I suppose because these vegetables were introduced in agriculture by the Arabs, like the word for carrot is zanoria, if I'm not mistaken, or zanoria. What is the correct pronunciation, Andres? Carrot.
Can you repeat the word, please? Because I didn't hear it properly.
Zanoria or zanoria, the carrot. The
Zanahoria.
Zanoria.
Zanahoria, sì.
Zanahoria. Clearly has nothing to do with carrots and carota and so on. That is the Latin name. So, okay, this evidences of the Arabization of the population is most becomes very prominent when you think of the following. There is some witness of the 9th century of some Christian Spanish inhabitant of Cordova who was writing to another friend in Latin, and he was saying, who nowadays can among us write in normal Latin a letter to a friend? All the young people want to imitate the Arabs. They only study Arabic language. They only try to be proficient in Arabic, and they almost forget their Latin roots. This is a very interesting testimony. I found this letter of some unknown people that was quoted in a diploma thesis about history of Spain in the Arabic times. But the most evident witness of this Arabization of the whole country was the fact that although, as you know, the medieval Arabs of Spain were very much tolerant, and Arabic religion coexisted with Jewish religion and with Christian religion, but the Christians of Spain, separated from the rest of Christianity, developed their own. They kept their own old rituals that were of Visigothic origin, and in contemporary telling of Hispanic history, this Christian church that coexisted with the Muslims in the Middle Ages is called Mozarabe, which is clear, means the Christians among the Arabs. And after the complete Reconquista, regaining of territory, that was source of problems with the Catholic Church, because these ancient rites of the Mozarabe were not accepted, and slowly the Catholic Church tried to suppress this particular kind of ancient Christian rites. But the most evident, I mean, the strongest evidence is the fact that at certain point there were scholars very proficient in Arabic who translated from Latin into Arabic the all the Holy Bible. That meant clearly that that was for the use of the priests and of the Mozarabic Church, that were probably speaking Arabic to the followers and to the believers, because they used mostly Arabic. So the Arabization was very, very deep, at least as far as language is concerned. Some estimate is that around the 9th century, at least 10 million people in Iberian Peninsula spoke in Arabic, and the rest maybe spoke their Latin origin dialects, from which came out the Spanish language later, but the Castiliano in particular. but probably everyone understood Arabic, because that was the language of the dominant people, and also it was, this is important to stress, was the language of culture, and probably also of diplomacy. So, having said that, what happened is that, as I stressed, at a certain point, after the fall of the Abbasid, of the Umayyad dynasty in Damascus, the governors or emir of Cordoba and of the other, who was supervising all the other subsection of what was called Al-Andalus, claimed to be Caliph himself. And so started what was the Caliphate of Spain, that extended all over the peninsula except for this northern west part, where there were the Christians surviving in their mountains. The capital of the Caliphate was Cordoba, and it was there was a succession of quite good caliphs, open-minded, who defended the religious tolerance, and who, on the other hand, did the same in Spain, in Cordoba, that was done in Baghdad by Al-Mamun, as we described. So let me go for a moment to our famous chronology, so that we can see some of the events and get an understanding of what followed. Just a moment. You have to open another file. No, it's not that. Sorry. Here it is. No, I think I have placed it here in special relativity. Yes. Okay. We go to this chronology, because I don't know what is your personal opinion, but my opinion about the way I was taught history in my youth at school is that, of course, there was sometimes an emphasis on some dates, but there was never an attempt by our teachers to get an overview of some period of time from different viewpoints. So you were studying the history of Greece as something independent from the history of Rome, and then you were studying the history of France and Britain. The important thing is that all the geopolitical entities interact. And if you want to understand something about the past, the first thing you have to do is to look at parallel development, what happened at the same time in different places. So, having said that, I go to my chronological tables. I said a little bit later. Let's see. Yes, the important first date. So you see, it is parallel to the reign in No, sorry, I told you the wrong thing. Have to go a little bit further. Yes, for instance, something that is still witnessing the unity of the Dar al-Islam is the fact that in 824, an Arabic fleet from Al-Andalus, so from Spain, invaded the Crete island, and they were able to expel the Byzantine. So they were still working together in a way at that time with the Eastern Caliphate. It was the time of Al-Mamun. But if we go a little bit further in the 9th century, we arrive at 1915. That is the date of birth of Hakam II. That is probably the most important caliph of Cordoba. And he reigned from 1915 to 1976. And under his reign, culture flourished in Cordoba at the highest level in Europe. And something similar to what happens nowadays with important universities like Harvard or whatsoever in various locations in the world, there were students coming to Cordoba to study, particularly from the east, from the south, but there were also some Christians that were coming to Cordoba. It was the time when in Cordoba developed philosophy. There were important philosophers, Arabic philosophers. Some of them were, rather than Arabic, were Jewish. But as I told you, there was complete tolerance. And Hakam II had the same sort of inclination as his predecessor 1 century ago, before in the East, Al-Mamun, in the East, towards culture. And he also desired to construct in Cordoba a very nice library. So for this reason, very, very important reason, some of the most important facts in the history of culture, which is not so much emphasized, is the fact that Hakam, at this point, considering himself an independent caliph, still had some emissaries, some delegates who lived in Baghdad and tried to buy, copy, or acquire in any possible way the books that were produced in Baghdad. We had the Bait al-Hikmah, as we said, the House of Wisdom, where this book were produced, and the flourishing of culture in Baghdad continued throughout the 10th century. And Hakam II acquired these books produced in Baghdad, among which were all the translation of the Greek sources ordered by Al-Mamun, and he had copies of these books transferred to Cordoba. And in Cordoba, the library of the Caliph became so large as that of Baghdad. it is estimated that it also reached 500,000 of books, which was a really impressive number for the time. It was also this, exactly like in Baghdad, that library was a place of studies, of meeting, was a center of development of thought and culture. But by the end of Hakam life, his son became caliph, but that was the end of the golden period. Because what happened in Spain and in general in the Muslim world was the first appearance of intolerance and fanatism. The Arabs of Spain were completely innocent from this point of view. They had found a modus vivendi, like we say in Latin, with the Christians and with the Jews. They had, well, respect for the people of the book, as they were called in Arabic, namely the other monotheistic religions. It was not perfect, of course, because being Muslim, you had to pay less taxes than the non-Muslims. It was a sort of, sorry, how to say, a fiscal leverage to attract people to the Muslim religion. But apart from that, the Christians and the Jews enjoyed complete freedom, and some of them were even important generals or ministers or governors of regions and so on. But on the other side of the Mediterranean, in Morocco, started fanatism. It was the development of the so-called Almoravides. They are called in Spanish language, and in Italian it is translated Almoravide. But the Almoravides is just a deformation of the Arabic word, which comes from something al-Muhrabit, something like that. I'm not proficient in Arabic to tell you exactly, which means those who live in the fortress. The fact is that the first Almoravides were Berbers who converted to Islam, of course, who made their pilgrimage to La Mecca and came back with the ideas that the sort of Islam that was practiced in their regions was not as pure as it should be, and they wanted to become a real pure Islamic people. They developed a strong military power, and at a certain point, the Almoravides intervened in oh, it's finished here, unfortunately, intervene in the life of Spain. What happened later is known. After the death of Hakam II and during the reign of his son Hisham, there was how to say, a dismembering of the caliphate, because the leaders of individual regions, Arabic regions, started proclaiming themselves independent kings, so to say. They called themselves emir. And one of these emirates was, in fact, that of Saragossa, Andres. Other was in Toledo, other was in Sevilla, other was in Valencia, and in Badajoz, and in the southern part of Portugal. They were all independent, and in Spanish history, they came to be known as taifas of taifas. Andres, you can correct me with the pronunciation. Is taifas or
We say taifas.
Taifas. With the accent on E, taifas, right?
No, with the accent at the end. Tai, and it's both A and I. It's taifas.
Taifas. Taifas.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. So that was that dismembering of the caliphate was the occasion for the Christian rulers of the north to start their expansion, because they started making coalitions of some Christian state with some Arabic one against another one, and they were playing, Castilla in particularly was playing a very sophisticated and so to say smart play, and at a certain point it came to the situation came to the point that some of the emirs of taifas declared themselves vassals of Castilla or Aragon, and which meant that they paid some tributes, and occasionally should help their master in his battles or in his wars. So in this landscape, what happened was the heroic period of Hispanic history, the period of El Cid Campeador, when the Almoravides intervene with a very strong army and tried to submit to their own rule the whole of Spain, of Muslim Spain, playing a very barbaric role, because they were Muslim fanatics. And one of the worst thing is that in this period, precisely the Almoravides burnt the library in Cordoba. But fortunately, not all the books disappeared, because there had been why Spain was Islamic Spain was subdivided into independent kingdoms. Each of the emir had his own pretensions, his own important books. I mean, they claim to have a share of this library, and so not everything was burned. And in particular, very important collection existed precisely in Saragossa for the emir family. I beg your pardon. Lio, Imia Celovieca. Djevoushki, Lia, naverna. Lia može biti. Liu, maybe in Portuguese it sounds like that. Oh, ti sto parlando. Portoghese. Portoghese, sì. No, no, solo molti parlano spagnolo, ma la lingua è universalmente parlata in Brasile è il portoghese. Come in italiano e come in Italia tutti parlano italiano, la lingua del Brasile è il portoghese. Il resto dell'America Latina parla. Cioè, Brasile parla portoghese, fa eccezione. Vabbè, se lo so. Я знаю, тебе скажу. Sì, portoghese capisco. Sì, questo. Sì, per noi è più facile lo spagnolo. Il portoghese è un po' più difficile. Spagnolo capisco, io capisco tutto, portoghese quando parlano capisco pochissimo. Da, no, так хорошо. No, дорогая, я извини меня, студент слушаю. Давай. Sì, ma non adesso, не сейчас. Сейчас я занят in Alexi. Может быть. Я не знаю точно. Извини меня, я читаю лекцию. Давай, пока. I beg your pardon. My girlfriend wanted to know about Portuguese email because she is Russian and I speak Russian, but Portuguese I don't speak. Not even a word. Já não falo português. So I beg your pardon for the interruption, and I continue. If I remember correctly, maybe Andres can once again correct me. The emir family in Zaragoza was a family named Hud, and they were Arabs from the very, very beginning of the invasion. They boasted their origins from Yemen, even. But they were protectors of cultures, and so they had a very important collection in Zaragoza. When it came the time of El Cid Campeador, was the time when there was the Almoravid invasion, and the Castilians, with the help of Rodrigo, named afterwards El Cid, helped the Arabic rulers of Valencia against the Almoravids. And so there was the opportunity of intervention And Alfonso the Sixth, Alphonse the Sixth, was the king of Castilla and Leon, who had previously been prisoner, well, sort of, not prisoner, he had been exiled from his brother when their father died. The kingdom of Castilla and Leon was subdivided among the two brothers, Sancho and Alfonso, who was later Alfonso VI. And one had Leon and the other Castilla. But soon as Sancho expelled, quarreled with the brother, and he routed his army. And so Alfonso VI was exiled, and he went in exile to Toledo, where he was treated with all the honors as an exiled person by the local emir, the king of Toledo, the Arabic king of Toledo. That is an important detail in history, because later, as you probably know, there was the assassination of Sancho, and Alfonso VI came back with the help of the king of Toledo to his own domains in Castilla, and in Burgos he sat in front of the church, in the cathedral, in front of the people, that he was not guilty of the assassination of his own brother, and he said that a jury on the Bible, and so he was declared the rule of king of Castilla and Leon, and that is the real beginning of the strong expansion of the kingdom of Castilla. He intervened after the events in Valencia, when the Yusuf, the leader of the Berbers, Almoravides Berber, was contained, not really destroyed, but contained. He intervened in the internal politics of Toledo, and finally came almost without any battle to the annexation of Toledo to Castilla. So this is the very, very important moment in the history of Spain, but it's at the same time an extremely eventful moment for culture and science in Europe, because Toledo had been the capital of the Visigoths before the Arabic invasion. It was a very nice town, and it was the town that was later called by, I come back to my other transparencies. Let me see where they are. Here. Was called the city of the convivencia, because in the city the population was divided essentially in three parts. The Jews, there was a very large fraction of Jewish population. The Mozarabes, so the Christians who had lived inside the Islamic kingdom and who were still keeping their own rights and liturgy. And there were the newcomers, the Castilians. And finally, there were the Arabs themselves, the Muslims. So as far as religion was concerned, was three, but actually it was four, because the Castilians were Catholic, while the original Mozarabic population of Toledo was Mozarabic. But they found a way to live together in peace. And Toledo developed into an incredible center of communication between different cultures, and an incredible center of how to say, it was a place where were convened scholars from all over Europe. And their main goal in going to Spain at the time, the scholars were, as it was in the 12th century, because we're talking now at the beginning of the 12th century, the scholars were almost all of them were monks. They did not come only to Toledo, they came also to Zaragoza, to the Iber Valley, and not only from Italy. We will talk about a very important figure from Italy, that is Gerardo da Cremona, Gerardo da Cremona, but also from Spain and from France. Sorry, from Britain and from France. In Toledo at the time, there was a part of the city that was called El Burgo de los Francos, which is quite clearly where the people coming from France were living. There was the Judaria, where the Jews lived, and etc. The Jews, in particular, were very important scholars. There were a lot of philosophers and scholars. There were Arabic scholars, and there were Mozarabic people who were proficient, not in Latin, because Latin had almost disappeared, but they were proficient in Arabic, because they had lived and came from family that had lived among the Arabs for centuries. And they were speaking the their native dialect, that is the origin of modern Spanish language. So something very, very interesting happened. It happened that in this atmosphere of convivencia, the scholars coming from Europe, Northern Europe, say, Western Europe, tried to learn Arabic, or at least to try and find a way of communicating with Arabic-speaking people, in order to do what? Mostly to translate from Arabic into Latin important books of science. It was an activity that developed to such an extent that later there was what was called the Escuela de Traductores de Toledos. And this was established in a real institution some years later under King Alphonse the Wise at the beginning of the 13th century. But it started in the 12th century. And two figures, I would say three figures, are very important in this period of time. One is the Abbey of the chief of the most important abbey of the Western world, namely Cluny in France, was called Peter the Venerable, who came to Castilia, and he was promoting this activity, and in particular, he sort of stimulated the second important figure, who was Robert from Chester, also called Robertus Cetonensis. There are two names for him. He was a monk from Great Britain, who was living in Spain, was speaking Latin, of course, and probably also the ancient form of Castilian, but he was certainly proficient in Arabic, very much proficient in Arabic. He spent all of his life in Spain, and he was in Saragossa. And in Saragossa, he acquired books, and he started the translation of these books into Latin. He was sort of, he had a commission from Peter the Venerable to translate the main book of the Muslim religion, Al-Quran, from Arabic into Latin. And the idea of Peter the Venerable was that if the Christians could have control of the main religious text of Islam, they might confute Muslim religion better. But in any case, that was the case, that almost out of commission, Robertus Cetonensis translated together with another friend most of the Al-Quran into Latin. But he did not only that. In the city of Segovia, in those years, he translated also the book of Al-Khwarizmi. It was the first translation of the book of Al-Khwarizmi from Arabic into Latin, and it was called Liber Algebrae et Al-Muqabala. And it begins with the words Algorithmi Dixit. Algorithmi was his Latinization of the word Al-Khwarizmi, and it is a word that has a long was to make a long path in history, because it is the origin of the word algorithm in all modern languages. But the other figure, probably the most relevant of all figures, was Gerardo da Cremona, who lived in Toledo almost 40 years. He was Magister Artium, so he was he had received the minor orders, and he had studied in Cremona, in the local sort of school, university, but had a very clear idea. He wanted to translate, to recuperate and translate the main work of Claudius Ptolemaeus, the Almagest. He had a clear interest in science and in astronomy, and he knew that this book existed. Particularly, he knew that from testimony from the Crusades, who had come back from the Crusades and had told people of what they had seen in the East, in Antiochia and other places. So he had a clear idea that in Arabic there should exist a translation of Ptolemy book, and it was important to be retranslated into Latin to make it accessible to the Western world. And for that reason, he went to Spain. He had a special permit from the king of Castilla to establish himself in Toledo. And there he started a gigantic work of translation. Eventually, at the beginning, he had come to translate Ptolemy, but Ptolemy came only after. And it came, in fact, in an edition that was brought to him from Saragossa later. But he started with all what he could find. And the process has been clearly described by recent historians who had gone through the pain of finding testimonies and sources and whatever, and reconstructed the atmosphere of Toledo in those years. It was the following. Certainly, person like Gerard da Cremona came to understand some Arabic, but probably it took a long time and not immediately. So the process of translation was a two phases. It was in two phases. There were helpers in his team. He created a real team of traductores that was composed by himself and other learned people from the West who were very proficient in Latin and knew a little bit of Arabic, but not too much. With the years, this knowledge of Arabic became larger, but not. We cannot expect that it was so proficient at the beginning. Then there were scholars, Jewish scholars, who were speaking perfectly Arabic and Hebrew, of course, also, and could express themselves in the local dialect, in the local, so to say, how it was called, in the vulgar dialect, Latin dialect of the common people. And then there were the Mozarabs, who were very much proficient in Arabic, could not speak Latin, and were not sufficiently, they knew the Arabic at the highest level, but they were not very much learned people. Sorry. So, okay. What was I saying? So it was these three people, kind of people, worked together. Essentially, they were reading the Arabic text. The Mozarab was explaining the content into the vulgar with poor words. The Jewish person would correct because he was a learned scholar, better rephrasing of what was explained by the Mozart, and the Latin-speaking monk understood the Latin, the vulgar, and put it in good Latin. So that was more or less how the team worked. The result was impressive. In these 40 years, about 40 years of his life in Toledo, Gerardo da Cremona translated from Arabic not only the Almagest, but the elements of Euclid, the surviving book of Diophantus. He translated the whole Almagest. He translated the works, the original works of several Arabic philosophers. He translated the entire work of Galen, the Greek doctor, the Greek medical doctor living in Rome in imperial times, that was the main source of ancient medicine. And you can continue the list. It's impressive. Obviously, he was the leader of a group. It is not even conceivable that he did all by himself. He had this this equipe of people working, and he could establish this enormous number of translations. These translations went to the West, arrived in Italy, for instance, and the book of the original version of Al-Khwarizmi, firstly established by Robert of Chester, was later revised, extended, and perfectioned by Gerardo da Cremona. And in this version, it came to Italy, where it was present in Pisa and was the source of knowledge of mathematics of Nicola Fibonacci, which is known for his famous numbers. But Fibonacci also read another important translation of Gerardo da Cremona, namely the other book I already mentioned of Al-Khwarizmi, that came to be known in the West as Liber Numerorum, as Numeri Indorum, namely the present notation, mathematical notation. And Nicola Fibonacci, Nicola Pisano, detto Fibonacci, his father was Bonacci, so Fibonacci means son of Bonacci. Fibonacci was the author of the famous abacus. That is the first test in contemporary arithmetic, and it is responsible for the diffusion in the West of the numbers that we still use. Fibonacci was a merchant, and the abacus was meant to tell to instruct merchants in keeping their what we can call contability. Registration of trade registrations and registers. The first attempts at mathematical administration of affairs in trade. So you see, Toledo was an incredible. It comes to me the Italian word of fucina, which you probably understand. Also, it is the blacksmith. The blacksmith shop is the fucina, and in Italian we say fucina culturale. It is the blacksmith shop where culture started again to develop. And there was this golden period that was peaceful, but unfortunately did not last too much long, because, as you know, at a certain point, the history of Spain changed along another route, because in order to obtain the support of the Pope in their quarrels with other Christians, in particular with the Portuguese, the Castilians introduced, unfortunately, and at the same time did also the Aragonians, introduced in Spain the Inquisition. And you know the rest of the story, which terrible things happened that went against the Jews, against the Arabs, and they were as much enemies of culture as were the Arabic fanatics who destroyed the library in Cordoba. So I think that Escuela de Traductores de Toledo is an important moment in the history of Europe. It's an example of cohabitation, of convivencia of different cultures, and how much this is fruitful for the resurrection, not only of culture itself, but also of economic prosperity, of course, because science and economic prosperity go along the same way, as we know. So this is as much as I wanted to tell you about the development of algebra that started being known in Europe in those days. And of course, the continuation of the story has to do with the events that followed in the 15th century. I already made a lot of reference to them. That was the capitulation of Constantinople to the Turks, the escape to Italy, mainly to Italy, of the Byzantine scholars, who brought also books, original textbooks, but made what was an eventful, very much eventful happening in Florence, because I already told you that it was precisely in Florence that under the family of the Medici, that in the 15th century, in the half 15th century, after the capitulation of Constantinople, in the local, what we can call, it was called the Studium Florentinum, it is the University of Florence. It was created the first chair of Greek language, of ancient Greek language. That was occupied by some Byzantine scholars. And so in the West, people started studying the Greek, the true Hellenic Greek, true Hellenic classical language again. That was very, very important for the development of humanism, for the direct reading of those books that had come from Byzantium in the original Greek language, and those other Greek books that were recovered throughout the abyss of Europe by the humanists who started on the chase of Latin and Greek original text. And it was 1 century long sort of race who could find more books. in Switzerland, in Germany, in France, in the Vatican. Many books were found, and now there were people, again, proficient not only in the barbarian medieval Latin, but once again proficient in the classical Latin language and also in Greek, that could read them, translate them eventually from the original in Greek language, and compare the new translations with the ones that had been mediated through Arabic. Of course, there were differences, but all that was at the root of the Renaissance of general culture in Europe. In fact, it's called the period of Renaissance, but at the same time, it was the period when algebra started being developed, a new branch of mathematics that had been ignored essentially by the ancient, and now started developing quite fast. And in fact, my next story will be story in the Renaissance about the discovery of the solution of the third order and fourth order equation by Niccolò Tartaglia and by Girolamo Cardano. It is a very romantic story. And so I want to tell you romantic and dramatic at the same time. And so I want to tell you in the next lecture, because I see the time. I told you that I have to stop maximum at 5:30. And so maybe I stop now at 5:15. You will excuse me because I have an urgent family business to care about. And we will continue on Monday. Maybe on Monday I will have a little bit more time, and if you want to hear more, I can extend the lecture. So I wish all of you a good afternoon, and still before leaving you, if you have some questions, some observations, some criticism to make, I'm here to listen and answer if I can.
For me, everything's clear, and it was really interesting for me today. So,
and I'm interested in asking you, Andres, a direct question. Since you are from Spain, what I told you about the history of Spain is something that every Spaniard knows precisely, or nowadays you don't get too much information about those chapters of your own history?
this is something we study, maybe not so much the figure of Gerardo da Cremona, but
you didn't know about the Escuela
we know about it, about the school of the Traductors of Toledo, but
yes.
I didn't recall much about this figure. But the rest of it, yeah, more or less. It's been quite a lot since I've studied this, but yes, I think more or less every guy in Spain studies that at some
Yes.
point in the school.
That is what I expected. But I believe, instead, I'm now talking to my Italian listeners, that these details of the history of Spain are not too much taught in Italian schools, are they?
Well, I think, if I remember correctly, that in the schools in Italy, you talk about the Reconquista, but more from the point of view of the, Central European reigns getting back Spain from the Arabs, and not from the point of view of the culture and all the developments of that
yes.
time.
This is also, I mean, since you are much younger than me, I want to compare, because that was what we learned at school also. I mean, and the impression we had from the way they taught our school is that some king in the beginning of the 8th century decided to make the Reconquista and decided, okay, now let's start the Reconquista of Spain that lasted 700 years. I mean, things do not go this way in the human world. I mean, everyone has an horizon that is the horizon of his own times. So even Alfonso VI probably was already very much happy to have recovered Toledo and to expand his kingdom. But the idea that in other 200 years all the Arabs would be expelled from Spain, I don't think he had. What do you think, Andres?
Yeah, that's probably it. Yeah, I agree with you.
So we have a sort of, I mean, we try to evaluate, but that applies not only to Spain, applies to all events of history. We have a sort of bias. We look at our back in the perspective of the present and of the future. But people living at that time had different perspectives. And we should try to understand the perspective of the time if we want to understand their way of thinking and their way of acting and the values they believed in and what they wanted, and so how they acted. So we have to understand our past, and that is true in science as well. We should not think that our friend Al-Khwarizmi was thinking of algebraic equations in the way we think nowadays. He started in that direction and went his own way to a certain point. Then I will tell you the story of the third and fourth order equation that is really very interesting. And that was already along the idea that we have of algebra. But then, of course, came the story that the fifth order equation could not be solved. That's the story for next lecture. Huh? Okay. So I leave you to your occupations and see you on next Monday. Okay.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye.